Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're excited to welcome you to our live conversation focused on what it really takes to move the needle on high school graduation. And today you'll hear directly from a leader at KConnect who is impacting this work, and he'll be sharing what's working, what they've learned, and advice for others who are looking to create change in their own community. I'm Josh Pollack. I'm a network advisor with StriveTogether, and I have the privilege of partnering closely with KConnect as they advance high school graduation and other cradle to career outcomes in Kent County and Grand Rapids, Michigan. And in my role, I support their team with strategy, peer learning, and connection across the Cradle to Career Network, which is a national network of community partnerships working to ensure every young person has a clear path to economic mobility. But today's conversation is focused on KConnect's work, the strategies, partnerships, and systems they've built to drive results in high school graduation. Over the past decade, as you'll hear, graduation rates across Kent County and Grand Rapids public schools have climbed dramatically, reflecting the power of strong community partnership. And we're going to explore what drove this growth, the challenges ahead, and what other communities can learn to accelerate student progress. And we're joined today by Salvador Lopez, who is president and CEO of KConnect. I get the good fortune of getting to connect with Salvador monthly, if not more. And I just get to sit back and learn from all the amazing things he has. So we thought we'd open up that opportunity for everyone today, and let you all benefit from his wisdom and the wisdom of KConnect. So we welcome you, whatever platform you're joining on. Please drop your questions in the chat, and our team will be monitoring to make sure we can answer as many questions as you have in real time. But Sal, to get started, I'd love to turn it over to you to share a bit more about KConnect, the vision behind this work, before we dive more into the discussion.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Josh, to you and Strive Together for the trust, and it's a humbling experience just to be here talking to you. And I know how much the Strive Together network is doing all across the country. So it's just an amazing experience for me to be talking to you and also learning from you on a regular basis. So just truly appreciate that. In terms of KConnect and who we are, so we were started up about 13 years ago here in Kent County, Michigan, and a lot of people know Kent County because of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So Grand Rapids, Michigan is the second largest city in the state, and that's where KConnect is located. And before I tell you about the mission and vision and purpose, I'll tell you how we got started. So longer than 13 years ago, leaders got together in the community in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids has historically been one of the most philanthropic cities in the country. And so some leaders from government, city, county, philanthropy, education got together and said, we've invested a lot of resources into this community, and yet we still see some major gaps from prenatal all the way to career. And at the time, out of the Stanford Innovation Review, had to come out the collective impact kind of work, right? And so I think the story goes is that folks got on the plane and went to California and brought back that model and said, okay, how do we create this? How do we make this happen? And out of that journey came KConnect. And so the K is for Kent County. Kent County has about 650,000 people. Grand Rapids is about 200,000 plus like the suburbs and townships. And so the overall idea is that the KConnect is a backbone organization that believes in the future where every child and family has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their starting point. And the way that we go about doing that is by connecting people, organizations, and data to mobilize collective action and systems change. And so, yeah, we're a backbone. There are two things that we don't do. I often start off the conversation with that. We don't run any direct programs in our communities, and we don't provide any direct funding. And that enables us to be that neutral facilitator, neutral convener, data visualizer. And although we may be a neutral facilitator, a neutral convener, we don't seek neutral outcomes. We're looking to make sure that every child, regardless of where they start off, has the opportunities and the tools and the support system to be successful. So that's a little bit about us.
I love that. I always love the, yeah, neutral facilitator, not neutral outcomes. I feel like I heard that from you, and I just, it's one of my favorite like framings of this work. Um,
Mm.
and before we dive into the KConnect's work more, I'd love to have folks learn a little bit about kind of, I think people drive this work, right? And so we'd love to make
Mhm.
sure bringing you as your kind of person and self into this work and understanding your journey. I know, speaking of high school graduation, you're graduating today from the inaugural class of the Harvard Ed Redesign Cradle to Career Fellows. So, one, just want to say congrats to you as you're graduating from a program in my home state of Massachusetts, where you're hopefully at least while the time you're there rooting on my Celtics. But would love to just get a sense of like what's been your journey to this work, what drives you. Um, yeah, would love to start there.
No, absolutely, and thank you for the congratulations on the fellowship. It's just been such an honor to be here at Harvard, and be talking to you from this just such historic place, and the talent and the people here are just incredible. And so I can go on and on about that, but a little bit about me, what brought me here. It's really been a journey. So I was born in Salinas, California. In the state that you're in. It's interesting enough. I'm in your home place, and you're in mine. And Salinas, California is a highly rural agriculture kind of a place. And so my parents were farm workers. My grandfather was a farm worker. My uncles, some of my aunts were farm workers. So that's the community that I grew up in the first almost 15 years of my life. And so I grew up in a neighborhood with housing authority housing. Like we moved quite a bit when I was younger. Attended schools that had really low resources with families that moved around a lot. So that's kind of core to who I am. And I'll save you the ins and outs of everything. But my parents didn't want me to grow up in Salinas much longer than the age of 15, because they knew that once you hit high school age, there were some very specific challenges that prevented you from being successful. Everything from violence to low income schools to just a variety of environmental factors. And so we moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, right around the start of my high school academic life. And I went to a blue ribbon high school called Northview High School. And by blue ribbon, it's a high achieving school, one of the best schools in the area, public school. And in those 4 years that I attended that high school, I still wasn't able to catch up academically because I grew up speaking Spanish and bilingual schools, and I just fallen behind significantly. And so even though that was a great school for me in those 4 years, the only school that would take me was Grand Rapids Community College. That was the only school that was eligible to go to. Like a lot of people say, I picked my college because of this. Well, I always say GRCC picked me, and then so I ended up I ended up doing great, transferring out of that school after getting my associates, getting my master's eventually in communications, developing a network and everything else, right? The rest is history, as they say. And now I was appointed to the GRCC Board of Trustees in 2021. I was elected in 2022. And earlier this year, I was appointed to be the chairperson of the board. So I went from being the student there to like essentially being the head person at the college, which is crazy to me, right? And if in my mind, right, if you can't see cradle to career in that, like I don't know, I don't know what else there is, right? Because there are so many touch points in a child's life that get them from one part of that continuum to the other. And I feel like my life's been that. In a lot of firsts in my family, first generation college going person, first trustee and chair in 112 years of the institution, that is a Latino. And so just a lot of honors, if you will, based on my learnings and the people that have supported me to be here. A huge amount of people that have just supported me along the way. So that's a little bit about me, probably more than you wanted to know. I will also
No,
say that the Detroit Pistons are number one right now, for the most part. So and I know you like Boston, but Detroit's doing pretty good.
oh man, we were doing so well. We were doing so well, Sal. No, I so appreciate you sharing your story. I know it requires vulnerability, but just I think to your point, like the full continuum is so evident in your journey and those different critical touch points and connections where there were challenges, but also where even amidst challenges, right? Things like that critical like step of taking high school graduation and finding yourself enrolled in post-secondary was such a critical transition point for you and kind of your journey. And so I just really appreciate you sharing your story. They're lucky to have you on that board. I was going to say it if you didn't, but now you're paying it forward and ensuring there's lots more Salvador Lopez's following behind you. So
That's
excited
right.
for the future there and in the region. But all right, we'll pivot back now to kind of diving more into high school graduation work that you've been leading.
Mm.
Um, and just want to kind of share a little bit of context of, again, of why we're starting this conversation with you all today in terms of the really incredible improvement you've seen. So just to name the gains in the county for high school graduation between 2014 and 2024 countywide, graduation rates improved over 10% from a little over 76% to over 87%. And in Grand Rapids public schools, that improvement was even more pronounced, increasing from 49% to over 82%, which translates to roughly 1 in 3 more students, I think, graduating than a decade ago. What do you attribute that success to? Can you kind of share the story of how that transformation happened?
Yeah, no, and I think what I'm about to say, it probably makes a lot of sense with folks in the Strive Together network, and it starts with the partnerships. It starts with the people on the ground doing some significant work from leaders within the Kent Intermediate School District, Kent ISD, we call it here, in various school districts, everything from superintendents to cabinet leaders to teachers to counselors, advisors, community, parents, families. It takes everybody, right? So often what we talk about is there isn't this one formula that's going to work. It takes a collective movement with everyone kind of rowing in the same direction, that really helps support the children at the core, at the center. It helps support the whole child, we often say. And so often what Grand Rapids Public Schools, for instance, and other schools focus on is being intentional, right? The tracking, the ensuring that they're looking at where a child is. Like my children, by the way, two of my 3 kids are school age kids, and my little one is 3, but my twin daughters are 11, and they go to Grand Rapids Public School. So I wear my parent hat when I speak about that. And I just know that if I don't get them to school on time, like I'll get a notice, like or if I don't, if for whatever reason they're not there, I'm gonna get a text, I'm gonna get an email, I'm gonna get a phone call, I'm gonna get a voicemail. And so just that intentionality around ensuring that families have every opportunity to intervene or to interrupt certain patterns that may be occurring for a variety of reasons. That's something that comes to mind. But the partnerships with the Kent School Services Network, KSSN we call it, which is a community school model, where they have they're in 40 different schools looking at the whole child and everything that the children bring to school with them. All of that makes a huge difference. So I would attribute the success to a variety of people that were also following the data, honestly. Like so when I started at KConnect almost 6 years ago, the superintendents of several schools were here, including Grand Rapids Public Schools. The superintendent for that was very involved in KConnect's creation from the beginning all the way to when she rolled off of the board and retired and all that stuff. But she was one of the major champions to take a look at our dashboard and bring that back to their team and say, hey, this is what the data is telling us. This is what we need to be focused on, and attendance is going down. How do we figure that out? And so that close partnership with some of the folks in community, I think is important, is critical.
Awesome. Um, Thanks for that, Sal. And maybe we'd love to like stay here for a minute and dive a little bit more deeply into like the specific strategies
Mhm.
that you've seen moving the needle. Like you were able to get partners aligned, you had systems leaders at the table. As you think about the specific strategies that you and your partners utilize to advance towards improved graduation outcomes.
Mhm.
I know there were a couple areas you decided to focus on around attendance, early high school success, teacher diversity, student enrollment and stability, and disciplinary practices. And we can kind of go through those one by one, or you can talk, kind of talk through them. But can you talk about some of those strategies, how you landed on them, and kind of the effect you saw from that?
Yeah, no, and there's so much that goes into this, right? So often we talk about the children spend about 20% of their life in the classroom and 80% outside of it, right? So
Yeah.
so that 80% is huge. So that means that if a child is either hungry or constantly late or chronically absent and or maybe has a parent with two jobs, right? That's not able to dedicate the time to reading and other components. There's so many factors that go into healthcare, housing, which we can talk about a little bit more too.
Yeah.
And so what we found that really worked was being incredibly intentional, right? If superintendents are at the table for one, for phone calls or for emails and say, hey, like this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing? Even if they get a little bit maybe a little bit defensive at times, right? Like, oh, like you're talking about the place that I care about so much, right? They're so passionate about it, but even just putting something on their radar is important. So for example, like in a couple of the school districts at one point, we noticed that a very specific group of students was being held back, if you will, from advancing from ninth to 10th grade. Some of that had to do with suspensions and expulsions. It had to do with a very particular demographic, right? And that involves race, ethnicity, and so I think part of what is required is that we have an intentional conversation with the person at the leadership level, right? And so as a backbone, we've done this in several occasions where we give somebody a call, the superintendent, and say, "Hey, we noticed this dip. This kind of stands out. Like just a heads up, like what's this about, right? We're not blasting it. We're not saying shame on you for this.
Yeah.
Um, and although they feel it, right? They feel something, some sort of maybe an uncomfortableness, if that's even a word. Um, we also saw that change over the course of time where they adjusted, they put together some policies internally to address that. And so those are the little shifts or pivots that can make a big difference. I've also been in communication with a lot of teachers and counselors in these districts over the course of my career. I used to, in a different life, visit 70 high schools a year in the state of Michigan. And so I just became very well aware of a lot of the practices and how caring people are, how passionate they are. And so some deans of students, for example, in some of the schools were so intentional about calling families up and so intentional about, I don't want to suspend this kid. Like, I want to work with you. I want to work with the issues that the child is having at home. And so just having that outreach to family is critical as well. And making sure that they're treating the whole child, if you will. So yes, attendance, yes, certified teachers and diverse teachers, that people that look like the students, but also teachers that don't look like the students, because we know that children benefit from people that have a different background as them, right? But at the same time, a Latino kid like me growing up in high schools, in predominantly white high school here in Michigan, having a Latino educator is huge. And a lot of us weren't seeing that. We don't see that person that looks like us. So increasing the percentage of educators that are Latino, Black, African American is something that we've been incredibly intentional about focusing on as a backbone, as a network. And we've started to see some success in that in the last 5 or 6 years. And we're going to need a lot more of that. And so everything from high quality educators to counselors to advisors to family support and engagement and policy change, all of that is big in this work.
Yeah, I know we're going to drill into some of that, and we'll post a blog for folks at the end as well that highlights some of the wins you've had around those specific strategies. I think it said about 30 and 35% increase in
Mhm.
Black and Latino teachers in the area, and so props to you all on the team for continuing to like surface that, even though maybe it's an upstream like a downstream effect, right? It's not something that when you change, the graduation rate changes tomorrow, but continuing to center like that full set of continuum of strategies. And so excited for the folks to read that blog and resource. And just a reminder, I'm gonna keep going with questions, but just whatever platform you're on, please, put questions in the chat for Salvador and about KConnect's work or his leadership. Our amazing comms team is monitoring that, and we'll make sure we're bringing out questions from the audience. So, just to you mentioned kind of a full set of strategies and the county. it was pretty shocking to see like the growth in Grand Rapids public schools. It was almost, I think, a 40% increase in a decade in graduation rates. Can you share a little bit more about the story in Grand Rapids, if there were specific strategies or policies or kind of how that they were able to see that level of dramatic improvement in just a decade?
Yeah, no, so it goes back to the partnerships and the people, right? And I think the superintendent has released a number of stories too about the incredible work that they've done around attendance. I mean, the attendance work group, as we called it, some years back, was very close to the KConnect work and network, and so it's something that we followed very closely. Is what's preventing a child from showing up to class, and we know that a lot of it has to do with the 80% of their life, right? It's the communities that they're growing up in Grand Rapids specifically. When you look at the overall population, it's one of the most segregated cities in the country historically. And so communities are divided based on a variety of factors, low income specifically. And although the county-wide is very rural, in terms of the Grand Rapids public school system, there's a significant amount of an urban population. And so what happens to not make this too academic, right? It matters where you are born ultimately. And if you don't have the additional supports that's meeting the families where they are with intentional people that are doing that outreach, that are going the extra mile to I gave the example of my children, right? Like like sometimes I kind of like this is a lot. Like there's a text, there's a voicemail, there's a email, and then sometimes I freak out because I might be in a meeting and I'm seeing like communication from the schools, like, oh no, is my kid okay? But ultimately that's high touch, and I think you have to be high touch with children, and I've seen that happen, in not only in GRPS but in neighboring school districts as well. But I think they've been truly intentional about the outreach of children. And they've also changed a few of their policies internally from some of the articles I read, just to make it a little bit more attainable. Significantly around the COVID pandemic time, I mean, policies had to change a little bit, right? Kids were staying at home. People weren't able to go into the schools. And so making the proper adjustments to make sure that children are meeting the the baseline kind of learning styles that they need to achieve, while also adjusting and pivoting a little bit to ensure that we're meeting the families and children where they are during a very difficult period of time.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks, Sal. I'm gonna say something now that maybe as we look at the critical career outcomes might not be a popular statement, which is that sometimes high school graduation as a metric for me, candidly, is a challenging milestone to hold as like an outcome area that should on its own be celebrated. And I say that just like candidly from like my experience as a teacher, I'd often see a lot of kids push through the system for a whole host of reasons, right? And some out of trying to look out for them, but others candidly for accountability reasons or other things to push them through to graduation. But the truth was pushing them through, leaving them completely unprepared for success in whatever their next step is, or without a clear path to a next step. And so, high school graduation, we know is such a critical milestone um, for individuals, for families, for communities, and yet like if it's not connected to what comes after, it can ring hollow. And one of the things that like in knowing a little bit about the KConnect story, it's been exciting to see is that as your high school graduation rates were climbing, that was paired with actual like, college enrollment levels also climbing alongside that. And so I was just curious, as you have worked around and KConnect has worked to support increased graduation levels, how are you ensuring that students are not just graduating high school, but graduating ready and prepared to pursue next steps, whether that be college, certificate, trade program, careers?
Yeah. So, oof, that's real talk though. And this is where we love going into this space because it's such a critical space. Like we really need to be talking about the actual cradle career work that best prepares our communities to meet the children where they are, to make sure that they're succeeding beyond simply graduation, right? Or graduating. Now, there's a couple things that I'll divide my response with my lived experience, And then I'll talk a little bit about some additional factors to consider when talking about this, because my lived experience coming from California, with probably, and I don't even know what they were, but I imagine my reading scores were not very high. My literacy scores were not very high. My math proficiency certainly wasn't where it needed to be. And I graduated from a really good public school, right? I didn't graduate with a high test score. I didn't graduate with a high GPA, but I graduated. Now, if I wouldn't have graduated, I think it would have had a very significant negative impact in my life, right? But I was able to go to a community college that was able to help me take additional courses, that additional math courses and English courses that got me to where I needed to be. Now, I would argue that hopefully we can intervene much sooner than that for the majority of children, so we don't have to do that every single time. But that is a different path for some folks that they can still take.
Yep.
Where if we cut it off and say, you know what, we're just not going to pass you, or you're not going to graduate. We can take a really good educated guess at which populations that's going to impact the most. And historically, it's low income, whether they're rural or urban, right? Low income families that are going to hurt the most. And we know that there's a significant difference in salaries and income for high school graduation and also college graduation, right? There's a significant increase for both when you graduate. And so it's such a sticky point, because I do think that we need to be paying very close attention to whether or not a child is ready to start kindergarten. We need to be placing very close attention to attendance. Are we starting to dip a little bit since COVID and the pandemic? And the answer is yes, that a lot of school districts, not just here, but across the country, are starting to go down. And that's going to impact graduation and down the road. And so how are we filling that gap? And then in terms of third grade reading, we've also seen a dip. And again, some external factors related to the pandemic and related to just where we are as a society, technology, AI, you can name a bunch of different things. Like there are so many factors that are going to impact whether or not a child is ready to be reading at the age they're supposed to be reading at, in order not to fall behind at third grade, for example. Math proficiency is huge. Like we're also seeing a dip in math proficiency by the time that we test children at the eighth grade. And if we're not catching and intervening and being intentional, I think you will see graduations go down. I do think that there's a high risk of that. And so I do think that one perfect example of this, and I don't want to ramble too long here, is that the state of Michigan had this 60 by 30 initiative that the governor's office came up with. And essentially, 60% of the population in the state of Michigan that's eligible should have either a certificate of some sort or a degree of some sort post-secondary after high school graduation by 2030. So we're shooting for 60% as a state. And then some leaders in the county got together. I was fortunate enough to be at the table where we were told we're going to be reaching that 60 by 30 um not easily, but we're going to make it, like without doing a whole lot. And so we decided as a group to, can we increase this by 80 by 30, and Kent ISD and Grand Rapids Community College and other folks were involved, can we make that 80%? And what we're finding is that sometimes data can be skewed, right? Because if a significant amount of people are moving into the Grand Rapids area, to your point from earlier, and they're coming in with degrees, and we're counting those folks as certificates or degree completed folks, we're not potentially paying attention to the pipeline of people that are being born here, that are going through the cradle to career continuum, right? And so we just have to be incredibly careful with the way that we review data, the way we explain it, the way we share it with folks. And one of the biggest things that I'm sharing with people is that the goal for reading proficiency, and for a child to be able to read by the third grade at a level that meets that standard, and math proficiency as well, it has to be at that 60 and 80% as well. Like we have to shoot for those goals and setting those goals, because otherwise in 10 or 15 or 20 years we'll be feeling the difference, right?
Yeah.
When these would, and so I do think I don't have a direct answer for you other than we need to do better. And I think we've had some extra, and not just us. I mean, us as a whole, as a country, as communities across the country are also feeling this as well. I think we need to be intervening and providing the support as best as we can, given the resources that folks have. That would be my best answer, is just continuing to rally around some of these underground folks that are doing some significant work.
Yeah, and I'm gonna come back to your. I want to come back to your like upstream work that you're doing to try and address that pipeline. Just putting on your like trustee hat for a sec, or and also just the K Connect work that you're doing later on. When students are graduating high school and going on to higher ed institutions, what are some of the ways that you all are working for students that have gotten to high school graduation but still might need additional supports or ensuring that they can be successful or post-secondary in careers? Are there ways you all are working to support them or the community is kind of wrapping around them to ensure they can be successful, even if getting even just to high school graduation was a challenge, or they may not have all the tools to be kind of like out the gate successful at the next step?
No, and I think this is an area where we certainly could do a lot more. I think there's still this almost invisible group of folks, of students that kind of go unseen in terms of the kind of support that we still need to not give up on folks, essentially. And I think the community college is well positioned to catch some folks up to speed. The limited English proficient individuals, for example, is an excellent place to start there, where Grand Rapids Community College can offer some additional support for students before they officially get on the path to pursue their associate's degree, for example. And so there are some very key examples. There's a GED programming that's been offered by community members like the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan historically, and other folks in the greater Grand Rapids and Kent County community. And so I do think that that's when the community steps in and helps support, because again, I think that the system of education is so taxed with having to solve so many different issues for a child, where they only have them for 20% of the time, right? There's only so much they can do. And it's not an excuse. It just means that 80% needs to step up. Or the community support, the housing infrastructure, the cities, the counties, the government, the policies, all of these people need to really circle around these families and students and support them. And I think we have a lot of work to do in that area.
Yeah. Well, you teed up the next question, whether you knew it or not. You teed up my
No.
next question perfectly. But I KConnect's work, early work, really, I think, focused actually in the housing sector.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned, right, you only have that 20% that's around of students' time that's really in school, and yet we invest a disproportionate time, a set of our time thinking about in-school supports for students. While there are so many
Mhm.
other systems that, if we're respecting their true experience, touch their lives, and maybe are not being optimized to support them, whether that's housing, health, transportation, food security, so many others. And not just for students, but for their families, to ensure that the families can be the strongest support for students that their students that they want to be. Can you share how you're thinking about those cross-sector challenges and the wraparound supports that we sometimes think and we know are so critical to support students, and set them up for academic success?
No, they're huge. And so K Connect historically, we had what we call an let's see what we call these people. Like, we call them it's kind of a collective impact leader table, essentially, of lead competing partners, we call them. And so lead competing partners, like, I'll give a couple shout outs here, like Essential Needs Task Force, now Housing Kent ISD. And so we just had a variety of partners that from different sectors come together to take a look and address, okay, how do we make this a cross sector effort? How do we make sure that beyond education, we're doing everything we can in our lanes to align and coordinate efforts to get children and families across the finish line. And housing is a really good example. So I think it was close to 2018. This is before my time. KConnect received a letter from, I believe, 11 leaders in the community from the city and county and different sectors saying, we have a crisis in housing. We have a significant issue with housing insecurity, and we need really to visualize the system, because the system was really quite broken in many different ways. And so KConnect received this letter, and they said, we were predominantly in the education space, but we've seen some of the work that you are doing. Can you come over on this side? And so KConnect at the time signed up to do like 6 months worth of work. And those 6 months turned into 5 years, just because it was such deep work. And we had to convene a variety of experts in the field in housing. I think at one point it was over 100 different organizations that were involved, and we visualized the system. And that's around this time I started that we were getting close to landing on the backbone. And so I was the interim executive director of Housing Kent, systems backbone collective impact organization that exists here out of Kent County to help address some systemic issues that are going to take time to figure out, to acknowledge and heal, right, and move forward. And so we understood as a community that we needed to fully invest our time into the space. And now we have a variety of organizations that are taking a systemic approach to housing, and they're looking at a child as a whole child and intersecting some of that work with the neighborhoods that a child is growing up. Does a child have access to the school? If it's a high achieving school, a theme school, as we call it sometimes in their neighborhood, are they able to access that school? Or are they like you waitlisted, right? Or and then they live right across the street. So there's a variety of factors that school of choice and challenges that school of choice can bring. And so just getting together with city planners to government folks to housing folks to food insecurity folks and saying what can we do to work together to make sure that we're in communication to move our families forward.
Yeah. So yeah, you got rope-a-dope for good. You thought you were signing up for a few months and then you signed up for 5 years, but
Oh
I
my,
guess when
yeah.
people trick you for good, it's okay.
No,
Um,
yeah. Shout out to my people over at Housing Kent though. They're doing some fantastic, really difficult work. And you
yeah.
know, as a startup, collective impact backbone, and I think they might be going on 3 years. It's not easy work to get going, and so super proud of that work.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know there's some good, yeah, if we can put it in the chat, we will. If not, maybe we can link to it after. I know there's some good I think
Mhm.
that was our first meeting. Said, go watch this documentary to
Oh
understand
yeah.
the amazing housing
Mm.
work that's happening in Kent County. So we'll see if we can put that in there. But I know we have some folks that are kind of joining to learn more about high school graduation specifically, and folks that are also just interested in how backbones can become highly effective. And one of the things that's been really interesting in getting to work with y'all is understanding kind of the unique structure that you all bring to set the priorities for the backbone and for your work in the community to ensure it's guided by community and that set of cross-sector partners. Can you share more about the Accountability Partners Council and how I think what you call APC really influences your work generally and how it may have influenced your work around high school graduation specifically?
Yeah, no, and so the Accountability Partners Council, I think, is just brilliant, and it was created. Again, this is before my time. I've going on 6 years, but the APC, and then shout out to Mark Waltman and a variety of board members that put together and community leaders that put together the APC. The APC or Accountability Partners Council exists to make high leverage decisions for the network as a whole. So if so I'll kind of since I don't have like a drawing here that I can unless you can do it for me later and edit it out. The players I would say are the backbone, which is currently we're staffed at a team of 10, plus consultants and contractors, and then there's a network of organizations of over 200 organizations that are active in our network in King County. And then there's the board of trustees, which are incredibly important. Those are the folks that oversee my work, hire, fire, evaluate the president and CEO. And so all of these folks can come together from the backbone organizing the convening to the network and the board of trustees. And when they come to the APC, and our next APC plug is on May 14th of this year, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's a little bit of a long convening. It's 4 hours. We try our best to keep people moving. But that convening is where we bring up some really cool new ideas that are happening. Like if the community is working on early childhood, for example, or business ownership, and there's some really good energy around some of the work, we bring it forward at the APC, and we have the community that is at the APC that's part of our network provide input. Like, should this be something that the KConnect should be moving forward with? Is this an indicator that we need to concentrate on, right? And typically we make a pretty good case as the backbone. Like we visualize as much data and storytelling and bring people with content expertise to the table. And then we allow the network to make a decision. So the Accountability Partners Council is more like an arena, like the space where people come together to not only learn but make decisions. And so the board of trustees are interesting for us because the way that our board was set up, it wasn't your typical governance body. Like they don't necessarily and this is always a little bit of a rub. They don't always have the decisions over like the day to day, or this is what you need to put in your strategic plan. They have a voice in that work, but ultimately the network at the Accountability Partners Council are the folks that vote something to go forward. So it's a beautiful process. There's a decision-making protocol that we've presented at a number of different conferences. I believe at StriveTogether, I think at one point, and that's where people can raise a card based on the topic that we're following. Let's say it's math proficiency, and that's an area that we need to go in or we want to go in, but maybe we have to get input from the community and the folks. They can raise a red card to say like, well, you need to redesign your plan because this ain't going to be it, right? Or there's a yellow card that they can raise and they'll say, well, for the most part, I'm in, but I think you need to make these changes. And then green is like means go, right? But they're all goals. They're just different variations of goals. Green
Hmm.
is like let's go pretty quickly. Yellow is let's go, but with some caution and some changes. And red is we're gonna go, but we're gonna have to redesign this. So it's never a matter of not doing something. It's more about how much work we have to put in to make it go forward. And then we're very data informed through our data dashboard, 27 indicators, 8 success measures. We follow a lot of the StriveTogether work in this regard. And so we come very well prepared to the Accountability Partners Council, but the voices of the people, their insights, their content expertise, all of that gets taken into account before we make a big time decision to go into a specific area.
Yeah, I appreciate you also drawing the distinction between the board and the Accountability Partners Council because I think that is
Yeah.
kind of an unusual way that you truly live into being community driven.
Yeah.
Um, I realize it may have happened years ago, so no pressure to answer this. But do you have a sense of how the Accountability Partners Council impacted or informed the work that happened around high school graduation?
Oof. So that would have been before my time, but I,
Okay.
I do think so. One of the biggest things that the accountability the APC has is what we call a gallery walk. And the gallery walk, because we only have 4 hours, and I say only, realizing that's a long time, because it's a little bit of a bottleneck because throughout the year we're doing so much work and we have 4 hours to like catch people up to speed on and vote and all that stuff. So we have what we call a gallery walk of tables of leaders in the community that are displaying their work. So it's like a cool science fair is the best way I can describe it. And these community leaders are next to the table with a screen and data and storytelling. And I do know that attendance was a big part of that work, that was being highlighted. Specific issues within different school districts have been highlighted, but issues and solutions over the course of time. And a lot of times, instead of putting them in front of the whole group and saying like, look at this district, which is not something we want to do, we always want to make sure that we're looking at the entire county. The gallery walk provides a specific look and see into one of those areas. And so if we I'll use math proficiency as one, like if that's the area that we're moving into, we might be from the main stage to just get it going. And then in follow-up years, there might be a gallery walk where if you're interested in that, you'll go and get informed and see how that work is moving along. So people get updated
Okay.
with the years. And so I would imagine that was definitely done by the backbone team at the time, is to make sure that people were well informed on how the work was going.
Yeah. I like the cool science fair. You may get, I'll let you handle all the angry science teachers that are going to say every science fair was
Yeah.
cool. But, you can go with that one. You mentioned that piece around different districts
Yeah.
and I think again, different backbones are structured differently in this place-based work. And I think again, it can be both an opportunity and a challenge, but you all have a regional footprint.
Mhm.
And again, that there can be great power in that, but it also means you have a lot of different districts and partners with different footprints that are informing the work and may have different thoughts about how to do this work. Can you share how you at KConnect have thought about like your unique value as a regional backbone, and how you leverage that to then do your work or wean in with the different local entities you work with to improve outcomes and learn from each other, build kind of that county-wide momentum?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question because one of our closest partners historically has been the Kent Intermediate School Districts, and we know we have I believe 20 public school districts in Kent County alone. And then when you add the public and the private, I think it's closer to 38 school districts. That's a significant amount, right?
Yeah.
And so what we do is we take the data available to us, and we visualize it in a way that tells us where the entire county is going. Now we can desegregate by school district at times, and we can do a variety of things with that. And we desegregate by race, ethnicity, and to an extent, economic status, depending on what we're looking at. But ultimately, we want to know how the overall ecosystem is doing. Like, are we going up as a whole, or are we going down as a whole? Because if we're going down, then we can probably desegregate a little bit and do so a little bit more privately and work with folks, like one-on-one, phone calls, things like that, maybe focus groups, whatever we need to do to maybe actual work and implementation. But it doesn't feel good to be singled out by anyone, right? And that's one of the biggest things that being a countywide backbone that we try our best to do is not compare like this versus this, right? Because school districts weren't created equally. Neighborhoods aren't created equally. The amount of resources that are distributed are not the same. And so we try our best not to say, well, this district is doing great and this one is not. Ultimately, if we look at the entire county, we could be doing better all across the board. And even if we look at one of the highest achieving school districts in the county, we're still seeing about I think 58% math proficiency for a very high achieving like a school district, right? And so that's not great. That's close to 50% of children that in the high achieving school district that aren't doing great. And so I think we try our best to grab as much information at a very high level and move people to work together without pointing fingers or without making each other feel like less than, right? And it's sticky. It's not an easy situation to be in, but we do our best to at least have those conversations with folks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you naming kind of the small p politics involved in this, and also kind of what I know we talk about a lot in this work, which is how to use data as a flashlight versus a hammer, and use it to inform positive steps to improve the work, not to punish people or to make people feel bad about where the work might exist today. And you mentioned the kind of ecosystems, and I know you've looked even down a neighborhood level work, but one of the things you all have been a real leader on is state level policy and advocacy and thinking about the enabling conditions at the state level required to unlock local and regional work. Can you share a little bit, and we'll put this in the chat for folks, and again, please put your questions in there in the last 10 minutes. We'll try and get at them. But can you share a little bit about KConnect state policy work? It's the PACE agenda, as you call it, and why influencing that state level ecosystem is so critical to unlocking the local impact.
Yeah, and so this is where I start to give some of my team members a big shout out here because PACE stands for Policy Advocacy and Community Engagement, and it's work that's been uplifted by the person that used to be a fellow, a postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Shayla Young, on our team, and she's now one of our vice presidents. And we felt the need, and it was part of our common agenda and roadmap from the beginning for KConnect to include policy and advocacy. But we weren't fully operationalizing that part of our roadmap, right? It's difficult to operationalize all the pieces for a young organization. And so when I got here almost 6 years ago, we really made it a point to see how we could get this policy advocacy, community engagement piece off the ground. And we know that policy and advocacy can only go so far, and community engagement and lived experience it's a big difference maker. And so Dr. Shayla Young was able to put together an event called PACE, where very similar to the APC, we brought people together and made decisions on what should be the county's policy priorities for children and families. And then we had a voting protocol. We had people come in. We at one point had a 5-minute presentation for policy priority from the for person and the against. And then we had a voting protocol. And shout out to Mark Waltman, one of our vice presidents, who's instrumental in the voting protocol that we use. And he's been with us almost with KConnect from the beginning. So he's kind of he calls himself like the historian, and He also got our data dashboard stuff off the ground. So it's just, also both people, Dr. Young and Mark, are incredibly brilliant, and so we combined kind of the APC model and brought in the policy priorities. And so now we have on our website under PACE, you'll see our policy priorities. And then we take it a step further because the KConnect way is how do we share the wealth with other folks. And so we have a PACE a toolkit that teaches other communities like this is the way that we did it. We're imperfect. We have a lot of learning still, but this is something that's worked for us, and you might consider applying it in your area. So our shared policy agenda can also be downloaded on the website. It's been incredible work done by Dr. Young and many other folks on our team, and it's something that we're just increasingly more proud of because we're just seeing a huge need for it during the moment that we're living through.
Yeah, and I know you've even started to support other backbones around the state and other partners around the state to think about how to have that statewide influence. And yeah, shout out to Mark and Dr. Shaywell Young. I feel like I feel like it's the opposite of Prince. You got to say the full Dr. Shaywell Young every time
Yes,
to put the respect on her name. But
that's right.
I'm glad you pointed to those resources that will illuminate not just the what of your work, but the how you all go about your work. Is there anything around the PACE work or the specific policy priorities you think you want to call out or just name as you think about high school graduation or some of those enabling conditions? I know you've looked at like school funding issues or are there any elements that you think would just be helpful to highlight for this audience today?
Yeah, so there's a few, and equity in K through 12 funding, educational funding is something that we just had an advocacy day, an education advocacy day that we led in the state capitol. Dr. Young's led a few of these now, and the team has done a great job of bringing folks along and saying this is how you can lead your own advocacy day for your issue that you really want to highlight, and this is how we can support you. The Michigan Community College Guarantee is just huge that in terms of policy and some of the behind the scenes work that our team had with incredible talented people across the state to get that to be a thing where if you're graduating and it's in your county or district, tuition is paid for. I mean, that's huge, right? If a child's able to take advantage of that, I mean, it opens up a significant amount of paths for them after high school. And so that's been a huge.
They'll pay for a 2-year college for free.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that guarantee is huge for our children and families. And I think there was a write-up about that for some of the work that our partners and the community did around that. And so we have some best practices in the space that are building that bridge from high school to post-secondary. Equity and teacher compensation is something that's part of our priority as well. We strongly believe that the high quality teacher aspect of it is going to move our children and families forward. And then access to comprehensive school-based supports, that making sure that we're meeting that whole child where they are, among others.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. That's great. And you kind of alluded to some of this, but would love, we talked about the kind of growth of the work or of high school graduation historically and that huge uptick in the last decade. Can you share like just where are you seeing the high school graduation work today? What are challenges you're hoping to address? Are there any upstream? You kind of again mentioned like we have to address the upstream challenges too. And how are you thinking about taking on some of those issues?
Yeah, some of it is related to what we don't know, right? There's, as you know, some of the data points and that we can have access to don't come along until like, oh shoot, like I wish I would have known this, right? But ultimately, 2020 was not that long ago. We're in 2026, and in the last couple of years, I think we've really gotten a really good sense of where children are. But I believe it was in 2024 for the state of Michigan that the one kindergarten assessment went away. And I would argue that and now schools are still measuring whether or not a child is ready for kindergarten when they walk through the doors but there's a variety of districts and schools are doing that very differently. And so in terms of having access to that information, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And so most recently, we partnered with a few organizations locally here. We haven't released it yet, but we're going to release it at the APC. Some information around where we know children are based on some assessments and lived experience and community voice that we're taking into account that tells us that our students are just they're not where we would like them to be. And instead of trending up, we're beginning to trend down as a county, as a state potentially. And so our job is really to raise that awareness, to push that button and say, hey, how do we intervene now? How do we make sure that we add the supports that we need before it's too late? And so that's a big concern right now. And I know that's super upstream for some folks, but that's going to impact graduation. That's going to impact post-secondary attainment, post-secondary success. And so it's really to our benefit and to the economy and to the workforce that we're trying to support for us to address and push that button now. And it's not the most popular thing to do because obviously we want to celebrate the wins, but we also have to acknowledge that if we're not gathering the community around and saying we need to improve our third grade reading proficiency and math proficiency. And I don't mean to make it like sound like the test is what we need to do. It's the child, it's the people that need the support systems around them. The last thing I would like is for folks to think that the children are the problem. I think the systems around them need to change and meet students where they are. So I can't state that clearly enough. And I think as a community, we need to come together and make sure that we're doing that as best as we can.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you also highlighted, we're kind of highlighting the different outcome areas month by month, and it can make it feel like you're only looking at one area,
Yeah.
right? But just what you named of that, there's an intersection relationship between all of these pieces. And so looking upstream, recognizing that how students are doing early on is going to impact their graduation rates. You can't look at any of these pieces in isolation. So appreciate you kind of calling our attention back to that. Real quick before I close this out and highlight some of the resources we have. Again, I know you're kind of graduating the prestigious fellowship. Anything that you want to call just for advice for folks either doing work in high school graduation or who are leaders and backbones in their communities? Anything you want to just name for folks that you want to leave them with?
The biggest thing is that we're always learning. Every community is imperfect, right? Like I think it's important to celebrate the wins though. And if you have a win, highlight it. I think sometimes we as leaders and as backbones and as organizations, we get the win and we're off to the next thing. Like, okay, let's go and look at this problem over here. Whereas sometimes it's good to take that victory lap just to make sure you're re-energized to do some of the work. And sometimes highlighting something great that's happening will help bring the resources to your community to help support some of the work that needs to get done, right? And so it's having the long game approach. I think that's really important. But again, we're still learning. And if anyone out there has any advice for us or anything that we could do, we're more than open to learning more. But we're never done learning, so it's part of that journey.
Thanks for that, Sal. Well, I just want to thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and special thanks to Salvador Lopez for sharing more about the work and impact of KConnect and the progress in high school graduation. Strive Together recently published a blog detailing KConnect's work in high school graduation. It's called A Decade of Progress in Kent County's High School Graduation Rates, and we'll put that in the platform or in the live, and also just encourage you to check that out to learn more about the incredible work you heard about today. I think we also named a couple of other resources we'll put in the chat if we haven't already. The PACE state policy framework and agenda, as well as KConnect's Live Pay playbook that helps share how to compensate community and engage community members. Sal, real quick, anything you want to name on the Live Pay front as we're putting that in the chat?
Super excited about that work. So a lot of times, so the live pay in a nutshell is making sure that people with lived experiences are compensated as content experts in the field. And a lot of times, these are the folks that have a lot of the solutions to move us out. There's people that are closest to the pain, closest to the work. And so ensuring that we have a guidebook is something that we've really put a lot of time and effort in, and now that's accessible online. And today I gave out a bunch of guidebooks to folks So live pay is something that we're hoping the community uses and learns from. And if there's any questions, we're happy to assist with some technical support where needed.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So again, we'll make sure that resource is available to you all. And if your team is also looking to make an impact in high school graduation, we're going to link to the Strive Together high school graduation playbook to get you started. You can stay connected with Strive Together and also learn more about the playbook and the Cradle to Career Network by taking courses through the Training Hub. The Strive Together Training Hub provides easy to access, high quality training grounded in proven approaches and tested by leaders across the country. Courses there are free to anyone in not just the field, but the world, and build leaders' capacity and capabilities to work across sectors, change systems, and improve outcomes. So we'll share a link to register for courses in the chat and encourage you to visit our website as well to learn more. But thanks again to Salvador Lopez, the KConnect team, and to everyone who joined us here today. And have a great rest of your day and week.
Thank you.